Hi everybody. I'm Alex. I'm with TypeFox, software engineer, and I'm working on Gitpod in Theia. And in my talk, I'm gonna compare Theia and its concepts to what we all probably know from Eclipse IDE. Yeah. So probably by now we all know that with Theia we can create awesome IDE applications and that they can run on the desktop or in the cloud. And we are using modern web technologies to do so. And the multiple language support is achieved by leveraging the language server protocol, and also debugging support, which is achieved by leveraging the debug adapter protocol. So I would like to put concepts of Theia and their counterparts from the Eclipse IDE side by side, and to show like similarities and differences, and provide a kind of different view onto the Theia IDE. So let's start with the most obvious thing, the GUI. As Anton already mentioned, we have this application shell, like the first and outer concept of the front end, and the workbench in Eclipse IDE is the counterpart, so to speak. We can have layouts of widgets, and we can use drag and drop to arrange our layouts. Quite common is a file navigator or navigator in general. In Eclipse, we are using the concept of projects as the top-level elements, and in Theia, it's more or less a file-based view, but we can also have multiple workspace routes. The application shell itself is, it consists of different areas, main and left, bottom, and right, which are collapsible. This is kind of predefined. We cannot change it. Out of the box, you would need to do some customizations. While in Eclipse IDE, you have the notion of perspectives, which can be like rearranged and stored by users. So you could have multiple ones and such. To achieve the same in Eclipse Theia, you would need to contribute something which actually replaces the default application shell. So those panels, they to the side and at the bottom, they're comparable to tab folders in Eclipse, which can be minimized, for instance. The comparable example is the outline view. And in Theia, we have this bottom panel, which can be collapsed, which can be toggled. So you see the problems view is quite similar. The editors, the central part of IDEs, obviously, they both provide a very rich editing experience. So in Theia, we are using or integrating the Monaco editor from VS Code, which also runs in the browser and therefore provides us the rich editing experience not only on a desktop but also on the web. And the language support is provided by hooking up language servers, different language servers, while on Eclipse side we used to have multiple implementations for different languages. So they are, generally speaking, they are widgets, as Anton mentioned, and the counterpart to widgets is maybe the abstract part on the Eclipse side. There is a mode which is called like singleton widget, which compares to the view in general. So we can have a singleton view which maybe is synchronized to a selection, which implies that there's sort of a selection service somewhere in the application. And whenever I change maybe the currently active editor, that this is synchronized again. Sorry, sort of issue here. Okay. So some more facts on widgets versus parts. In Eclipse, parts are usually rendered using SWT, though there are maybe some exceptions to that, but in general it's still SWT. And JFace is used to organize the UI stuff using model view controller pattern. And widgets and Theia, which provides basically like a container HTML element, and then you can use any framework, any web framework you like to render the contents of your view. There are some comparable features in both in the Eclipse IDE and Theia, and the command palette is comparable to quick access, while command palette is super important in Theia, also in VS Code, because it provides you direct access to all the commands registered in your currently active context. So you can search for available functionality and features. For instance, if you want to open preferences, you can just start typing and select open preferences from that. Preferences itself is form-based in Eclipse, while it's a tree and textual editor in Theia, which serves the needs and works nicely. And yeah, preferences can also be separated to a workspace level and a user level. So the user settings are the more generic ones, and each workspace can provide its own preferences. So we have like a layered view on preferences in Theia, which is quite awesome and is a missing feature in Eclipse IDE still. Yeah, those preferences and commands, they are contributed by extensions. So there's an extension model in Theia, which is very similar to what we know from Eclipse with the plugins. So Theia application is a composition of extensions, and each of those extensions can contribute something. So everything is a contribution. That same thing applies also to Eclipse, and that powerful mechanisms allows us also to customize everything, basically. So a brief overview of the architecture of Theia and where to put the extensions in. So Theia application consists of two parts, a front and a back end, and each extension can contribute to both. And they are interconnected with JSON RPC. So you can have on the front end calls like get status, and that will be translated, sent over, and on the back end you have some kind of result, and then that will be included into response, and on the front end you just await on it in TypeScript. That's really awesome because you don't see the complexity of that separation. Those extensions, as I mentioned, they contribute functionality. Similar to Eclipse plugins. So Eclipse plugins are packaged as OSGI bundles. So they come with manifest MF and plugin XML, so two two descriptors to specify different things. The plugin XML will, in the end, declare what kind of functionality should be contributed or what kind of contribution points should be made available. And in the end, nowadays, it's the application will create an application model from E4 project, and that kind of composes everything then. Theia extensions, first of they're plain npm packages, and in their package.json they will just point to JavaScript module that has a special meaning. It's so-called extension module, and that will provide bindings to be loaded into a dependency injection container. So in Theia, everything is going to be glued together via dependency injection, and those extensions will provide such contributions to that. So you have two parts. Like one is the contribution or extension point, that is like sort of the host or the usage side of any contribution, and then the contribution itself. So the extension points or contribution points have a very similar meaning, but the technical representation is quite different. So in Eclipse IDE, we have this painful XML schema to describe extension points, and I left out the Java code you need to parse and interpret that. While in Theia, it's quite nicely integrated with util to bind those contribution providers. So first off, you start with describing an interface that all the contributions should implement. That's almost it. You then need to bind this contribution provider, and afterwards you can inject it in the places you want to use it, which actually is one thing that is a limitation in the Eclipse world, because only the plugin that provides the extension point can actually use those extensions registered. The other side, so the contributing part, again, you have some XML declaration on the Eclipse side, plus the implementation, which the XML expression points to, and on the Theia side, you have plain TypeScript code. And actually, it's to register it, it's one line of TypeScript code to specify it. The implementation follows. It depends on the logic. So those concepts are pretty much the same, but also the challenges, like hard dependency resolution. There are a lot of pitfalls, and probably you know about that from Eclipse IDE, and we are facing the same. Maybe if you have a mismatch of extension versions, that the resulting application just cannot run properly. So there are dependencies between extensions itself or plugins itself that has to be resolved somehow. And then there can be also incompatible like library dependencies between or amongst the extensions. So, and yeah, in the end, one faulty extension or plugin can actually tear down the whole application. That's come true. Can we do it better? Well, VS Code does it better using the extensions that then run, so VS Code extensions that then run in separate processes, and they are communicating to a host in the main process, again using JSON RPC and such technology. So all the communications asynchronous by design, which also has the benefit that there are no lags in the UI. You don't see any like freezes on the UI side. And if one extension crashes, the application can recover from that. So Theia plugins, they're designed after VS Code extensions, running the plugins in sandboxes, and also using this JSON RPC as communication layer. And we're now in a progress to have the compatibility to the whole VS Code API. That's cool. The implementation is supposed to be done then with core APIs. So it's a common question, or a lot of people are asking when to use what. And actually, so there's still purpose and need for Theia extensions, especially because this VS Code API is quite limited. You cannot do everything you want. It's a solid but limited API. And if you want to create products, like we've seen with a lot examples yesterday and today, you want to have some kind of branding. You want to have want to contribute some special functionality which is not covered by that API. You would need to write Theia extensions. But beside that, you can also then use VS Code extensions or Theia plugins to get this plug-and-play extensibility so that user can select some sort of feature sets and so on. Yeah. I think that's basically it. And thanks. Pardon me? For question.
Some of the XML that we've seen on the Eclipse side was actually done for scalability, so we didn't have to load the code.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have experience with how many extensions Theia scales? Can you do 1,000 extensions? Or?
No, but the other question or the reverse question to this dynamic loading of Eclipse extension. So we've been facing projects like some bad implementation of some sort of plugin for Eclipse. Leads to resolution of a lot of other plugins. So in the end, it's not so true that those extensions are loaded a lot later, but eventually they're going to be loaded once users start using the application. So there's not so much benefit to that. Yeah, so it's kind of comparable in terms of when to load what. But for Theia, it depends on if you're talking about the front end or about the back end, maybe. And those models will be instantiated once you need them. So it's also kind of on demand. Only the modules to register the contribution will be passed first. But those are only the contributing modules, not the entire instantiation tree and such.
In practice, we won't see such products which have 1,000 extensions, because you would always maybe add some extension to provide your IDE, and then you will use VS Code extensions for the rest. So doing this complicate with XML just maybe doesn't worth it. And not just startups faster than Java. Not just spawn faster processes than Java. So we didn't experience any problems so far with that.
So 2 questions. When running the hosted plugin, so are you using the same node process, or you create a new node process for each plugin? So then it will be safer, I guess, but very memory intensive.
For the host,
yeah.
for the plugin host, I've seen that there's only one.
Only one?
But only one. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And the second question is, have you considered expanding the Theia plugin API to also support things that are not part of the VS Code API? So doing stuff like the extension can do, but with...
I think the mess we have presentation.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, they will be covered in the following presentation. Cool. Okay. Thanks.